Hey guys, today we're looking back at some of your favorite crazy mother-in-law stories from last year. Imagine walking into your home to find your fiance's mother wearing your wedding dress. Would you snap a quick picture to blackmail her with? Well, that's exactly what OP did. Am I the a-hole for giving my future mother-in-law 3 days to pay me for a new wedding dress, or else I show the family a photo of her wearing it? Posted by Repulsive Scheme 1359. So, I'm getting married to my fiancé soon. I bought my wedding dress weeks ago, and my future mother-in-law kept pestering me about trying it on, but I refused. I finally shut it down after she offered me $100 to let her try it on. Her reasoning for persisting so much? She says it's because of her love for wedding dresses and her obsession with them. Then she could just go to a wedding dress shop and try on all the wedding dresses she likes. I'm guessing her real obsession has a little more to do with her wanting to dress up as her son's bride. Fast forward to yesterday. I came home from work early and found my fiancé at home. He freaked out after seeing me and tried to prevent me from going into my room while trying to text someone on his phone. I opened the door and was shocked to see his mum standing there wearing my dress. I instantly pulled my phone out and took a photo of her wearing it. She and my fiancé freaked out after I told her that she needs to pay me for a new dress in 3 days or else I'll show the whole family the photo. She started crying and then left. My fiancé blew up at me saying I can't be serious and that I overreacted because his mum just wanted to try the dress on. No harm done. Then why is she so embarrassed? But I refused to listen to him because, in my opinion, the dress should only be worn by the bride and the bride only. Quite frankly, I felt disgusted looking at the dress again. I don't want it anymore. And so I think it's only fair that she pays for it after she ruined it for me. He yelled at me and told me to wake up and stop treating his mum as if she was an enemy. We had a fight after he failed to get me to back down, and he's been staying with his mum since. I felt awful, but I spent $3,000 on this dress and worked really hard to get it. Now I can't stand looking at it, but people in my family think I'm escalating things and risking my relationship, not only with my future mother-in-law, but my fiancé as well. Am I the a-hole? Yeah, they're right. You are risking your relationship with your fiancé, but is that really such a bad thing? Your future mother-in-law isn't the problem. Your fiancé went behind your back and disregarded your wishes. Do you want to be married to that for the rest of your life? Any boundary you have regarding your marriage, birth, or children will be trampled all over by the both of them if you marry him. Update. My fiancé called and offered to pay for the dress himself so we can end the conflict. But first, he wants me to 1. Hand over my phone so he can delete the photo himself. 2. Swear that I don't have any copies to use against his mother later. 3. Apologize to his mum. And lastly, he asked that I quit his family group chat and log out of Facebook for at least a month. I haven't responded yet. P.S. He called with this offer/conditions hours ago, but I didn't want to include it in this post, but now I do. Also, I'm not sure if I'll agree because I don't want him to pay for it. I want his mum, the one who wore it, to pay for it. I'm not being vindictive, just trying to hold her accountable. Down in the comments, Moose Life says, "Not the a-hole, but are you sure you want to marry this guy? He stood guard outside your bedroom so that his mother could try on your wedding dress. Do you think he'll ever stand up for you against her?" Rain Squirrel says, "Send the photo to everyone invited with the announcement that, regretfully, you will no longer be participating in the wedding, but you wish the happy couple the best." Am I the a-hole for telling my mother-in-law if she expects me to get a DNA test for my son, then I want her to get a DNA test for my husband? Posted by GoldLake4903. I, 30 female, met my husband Stephen, 32 male, through a friend. We instantly connected and started dating not long after. We've been happily married for 5 years now and have a 4-month-old son. I met my mother-in-law at his uncle's funeral. He asked me to attend in support of him. But before we left, his cousin warned me about mother-in-law. He said she wasn't the nicest person, that she had impossibly high standards to meet and can be quite judgmental, so don't take it personally, as she's like that with everyone. I asked my husband and he agreed that mother-in-law can be quite judgmental, but not to worry, that he'll be there for me. I think they gave me the sugar-coated version of her because she was terrible. She made a scene about bringing a stranger to a family funeral, but my husband cut her off and said his aunt, who was the uncle's widow, said he could. She spent the rest of the funeral giving me nasty looks and making passive-aggressive comments. She also made a scene at our wedding, but that's a different story all on its own. After minimal contact with mother-in-law, my husband eventually told her that I was pregnant. I expected her to be angry and have a go at him, but she surprised us both and was the complete opposite. She was excited about being a grandmother. She was congratulating us. Her attitude did a complete turn, and I grudgingly allowed her to visit. When it was time to give birth to my son, she wanted to see my son being born, but I refused. That's when her ugly side reared its head. She caused a scene and was thrown out. I refused to let her visit us at home, and my husband agreed, but she ran crying and apologizing. She said she was just overwhelmed with being a grandmother, and her emotions got the better of her. Against my better judgment, I relented and said okay. When she first told him, she looked at me and said he was beautiful. I went into the kitchen to get us a drink, and I could hear my husband telling her to get out. I came back in and she started yelling that he needed to get the baby tested because he doesn't look like anyone in their family. He kicked her out. She told everyone that I cheated on my husband and that my husband needs to get a DNA test to prove that he was the dad. She got a lot of attention for that. So, I made my own post and said I'll get a test done when she tests for her son. That just made everything worse. She rang my husband up telling him to take it down. He just hung up on her. Everyone's divided and questioning my husband's paternity since she had such a strong reaction to it. Now, even my husband is starting to wonder, and it's making me feel like I went too far. I'm thinking, am I the a-hole for saying that? Wow, imagine if she just outed herself after all of these years. Not the a-hole, OP just used the Uno reverse card to perfection. Am I the a-hole for wanting my mother-in-law to move out after she kicked my parents out? Posted by Vetti Menti. Hi, I'm here to ask for advice and to make my husband see that I'm not the a-hole. Here's hoping you can see where I'm coming from. I live with my husband, 4 children, and mother-in-law, 65 female. My mother-in-law moved in with us back in 2015 after my father-in-law passed because she was financially struggling. My mother-in-law is not easy to live with, and we struggled immensely at the beginning, but after a few years, we found a way to cohabit. Then recently, my parents' house burnt down and they moved in with us while everything is getting sorted out with insurance and so on. My boys are sharing a bedroom as my parents are currently staying in my eldest room. My mother-in-law has struggled with this and she seems to hate my mother being around. My mother has done absolutely nothing to upset her or disturb her. In fact, my parents' bedroom is on the other side of the house. She doesn't, however, have a problem with my father and always finds a way to hang out with him. A few days ago, while I was away for work, a massive argument happened between my mother and my mother-in-law. My mother accused her of trying to seduce my father, and there was some inappropriate text sent to my father. My father had immediately showed it to my mother, and my mother responded as if she was my father to see how far mother-in-law would go. And well, she went far. My mother confronted her, and mother-in-law called the police, saying she felt threatened, who then escorted my parents out of the house. This all happened while my husband was at work and the kids were at school. My parents went to stay at a hotel and they explained what happened to me over the phone. When I returned, I gave mother-in-law 2 weeks to move out. My husband thinks I am escalating things and I should forgive his mother's actions because she was lonely and confused. FYI, there's nothing wrong with her. She's in good health. So, am I the a-hole for wanting her out of our house and my life? Edit. My husband hasn't seen the texts and pictures his mother sent my father. The only reason he hasn't seen it is because he refused to, but I think I'll have to insist because I really need him to understand how nasty she's been. Also, I wanted to kick her out immediately, but my husband begged me to give him 2 weeks so he could find a place for her. And my parents, being the saints that they are, said that I should give him that. My husband has profusely apologized to my parents, but my parents aren't upset with us and hold only mother-in-law responsible as it was her disgusting actions that led to this. This comment basically sums it up. Salt Lavishness 7560 says, Mother-in-law didn't just kick OP's parents out, She called the cops on them and had them removed from OP's home. Which reeks of mother-in-law now thinking she's calling the shots in that house, and if OP's husband gets his way, she will. I'm gobsmacked at the delusion of the husband. She's lonely. Then go to bingo, volunteer at the library, join a garden club. There's about a million ways an able-bodied 65-year-old woman can entertain herself and keep herself busy and engaged. One of those ways is not to put the moves on your daughter-in-law's dad. Hell, she initially moved in because of finances. Get a job. She wasn't confused about texting silverhead porn at that poor man. She wasn't confused when she called the cops on them. And she wasn't confused when she presented herself as the legal occupant of the house and had them removed. She's been there for 8-9 years now? She thinks she's got the position to call the shots in the home. Not the a-hole. Honestly, I don't know how she can stay after this stunt. Am I the a-hole for asking my son to bring my 6-week-old granddaughter to visit me without his fiancée? Posted by a throwaway account. My son and his fiancée, Jen, have a 6-week-old daughter, Lily. She also has a 7-year-old son that is not my son's child, but I still consider him my grandbaby. I used to get along really well with Jen and told everyone she was like a daughter to me. But when she got pregnant, she started acting weird towards me. Like when I asked to be in the room for the delivery, she said a clipped no, despite letting her 7-year-old son's dad's mum in the room for his delivery. No big deal, it's her choice. But when I went to visit in the hospital afterwards, she acted really put off that I was there. I figured she was just tired and left after 20 minutes to give her space. But then, it continued. I've stopped in to see everyone about 5 times since she had the baby, and every single time that I walk in, she gets really quiet. Whenever I'm holding the baby, she's hovering. She keeps snapping at me over small things. Like how I'm holding the baby because she's crying, obviously she doesn't like that, so stop. Or snapping at me for things I say to the baby, like when she starts fussing, I said, "You won't get your own way with me. You can't play me like that," in a baby voice, trying to calm her. And she goes, "She's 4 weeks old. How exactly is she trying to play you?" Then she got livid and actually kicked me out of the house one time because she picked up the baby for making the smallest of noises, and I told her the baby was gonna get used to being held all the time if she keeps doing that. And she said, "Well, it's a good thing she's my child and I don't have to listen to your crying it out BS." Well, I went there on Thanksgiving and apparently it was her mother's first time meeting the baby. And of course, the baby was all smiles and loved her grandma. But when I got the chance to hold the baby, she immediately started crying and was promptly taken from me. I felt very slighted. I asked my son if he would bring the baby to visit me without his fiancée because I feel like his fiancé's attitude towards me is the reason why the baby screams every time I hold her. I think she's definitely picking up on the hostility. I don't even know why she dislikes me now, but asking her currently would be pointless. He told me that he would absolutely not bring his daughter to my place without her mother because he wouldn't do that to his fiancée, who has never been away from the baby thus far. I told him that they were purposely ruining my chances at a relationship with my granddaughter, and he said that wasn't true, and that I need to stop pushing my old-fashioned beliefs, which is the first time I've heard of this. Am I the a-hole for expecting him to bring my granddaughter to me without her mother, so that I can have a relationship with her? I think this baby can sense evil. Esme Weatherwax says, "You don't know why she dislikes you? You've never heard anyone saying you're pushing your beliefs before? Really? Because I've been reading this for like 30 seconds and I already know exactly why she doesn't like you, and it's because you're pushing your beliefs on her. You're the a-hole. You're making this whole situation about you. Let them be a family together. Let them set the rules for how the baby's cared for, unless they're doing something objectively dangerous. You might spoil the baby if you pick her up is not objectively dangerous. Let go of how you're deprived of what you think is your right to be present at one of the most vulnerable moments in her life. You can't ruin a relationship with a 6-week-old baby, but you're well on your way to ruin the relationships with your son and daughter-in-law. Back off, way off, if you ever hope to be welcome in their lives. My mother-in-law got me arrested for domestic violence and I spent 23 hours in jail. Posted by Il Quill 1866. Mother-in-law flew in town for the holiday and was staying with us. She got very drunk the night of Thanksgiving and started shoving my wife around. I told her to stop or she'd have to leave, but she kept shoving and yelling. She has a history of drinking and putting her hands on family members, but my wife's family normally excuses it by saying that's just how she is. I finally had enough and demanded she get out. She obviously didn't take that well and started getting physical with me. She kicked me and threw some things. I started taking her bags out the front door, and she was yelling and bringing them back inside. This happened back and forth a few times. I'd take the bags out, she'd bring them back in, and start yelling at us again. She peed her pants and fell over several times during this whole interaction. Neither my wife or I know exactly when, but at some point, she scraped her elbow, and my wife pointed out that her elbow had some blood on it. Mother-in-law then started screaming that she was calling her lawyer. She waited until she was sober, about 1 p.m. the next day, and then went to the hospital for her elbow, and to report that I pushed her down. Police arrived at our house Friday evening and asked me what happened. I explained and showed them the Ring camera footage, which showed her repeatedly yelling and re-entering our home. It shows a lot, but since it's outside, it doesn't show the entire interaction, or specifically her falling. The two officers then talked to my wife and she explained the same interaction as I did. They then said they were going to write up a report, but they were satisfied with the allegation being false. All seemed fine. However, after about 25 minutes and a few phone calls, they came back out of the car and said the initiating officer, who was at the hospital with mother-in-law, wanted me arrested because he has probable cause. The officers in front of me disagreed and called their lieutenant and tried to get him to call the IO, but he just said it was ultimately his call. So I got taken in and processed about midnight on Friday and went to court at noon the next day. The public defender said, "I don't see why you're here." The DA or judge had dropped the charges without even speaking to me. I was dismissed and got out at about midnight on Saturday. I'd spent 33 hours in jail. My wife and I are emotionally wrecked. In a million years, I would never have thought I'd get arrested. My wife and I never want to see her again. I learned that I should have filed a police report as soon as she got physical with us, but since we didn't, that's why it was so easy for me to be taken in over this false accusation. Can I file anything now to help protect us? Can we sue for emotional distress? We're afraid that she's going to continue to pursue legal action against us since we pay most of her bills and she'll need the money now that she's cut off. Honestly, I don't even know what to ask here as it's still fresh. Thanks in advance. I'm confused. Don't you have the right to get physical if someone's trespassing in your home? Like, you have footage of her re-entering your home against your will. Am I the a-hole for dressing my baby girl in blue to piss off my mother-in-law? Posted by Forest Ghost. It started when we, me female 28 and my partner male 31, had our first baby, a girl. We bought mostly neutral clothes to make life easier, and because we like it. We got some hand-me-down clothes in both blue and pink and lots of gifts, especially from mother-in-law. She only bought pink, typically girly type clothes, but we didn't think anything of it and didn't mind at all. We put her in the girly clothes as well. Until one day, I dressed our girl in the colour blue, and mother-in-law lost her mind. She said, "No, you have to dress her in girly colours, otherwise she might end up as a homosexual or a trans person." I got so angry. So every time since then, I've dressed our girl in blue, only when we see mother-in-law, just to piss her off. It's making mother-in-law so mad every time, so I keep doing it. Last time we met up, she yelled at us to put her in girly clothes, and the usual, "I'm so scared she'll end up as a trans person." I told her it's just a colour. I don't care what sexuality or identity she ends up having. My partner thinks I'm overreacting and that it's unnecessary to do this every time we meet. He thinks I'm being mean to annoy her. Obviously, I'll stop doing this eventually because our daughter will one day decide what clothes to wear herself. But for the moment, my day gets a little better knowing I'm pissing off mother-in-law. Only because I know how awful she can be to people. It's my little revenge, if you will. So, am I the a-hole? Next time she freaks out that wearing blue will turn your baby trans or gay, tell her, don't worry. Like you said, changing sexuality and gender is really easy. We'll just put her in pink and switch her back. But in all seriousness, having your daughter grow up around comments like that could be really harmful. I love the pettiness, but maybe a more serious response is needed. Am I the a-hole for not allowing my mother-in-law to come over to my house unannounced and for no longer accepting anything she buys us? Post by Wide Raspberry 1280. I've been with my husband for 3.5 years, married for just over 1 year. This past November, we had our first child. My husband is an only child and his father was never in the picture. Him and his mum have never really been close. Now for a little backstory. We're both at odds with my mother-in-law, and it all started less than 24 hours after I had my son. My husband and I told both my mother-in-law and my mother that we didn't want our son's birth turned into a photo op. People taking pictures of me have always made me uncomfortable. My son had some complications immediately after he was born, and he was rushed to the NICU. I wasn't able to see him for roughly 9 hours. Once I was finally allowed to go into the NICU, my husband went with me, as this was the first time I was officially meeting my newborn son. Next thing I know, I look up and see my mother-in-law using this as a photo op. I was fuming. These were not the first pictures I wanted of my son, or my husband and I with our son. The next morning, my mother-in-law decided she wanted to come back and see our son, who is now safe and in our room. I was running on maybe 2 hours of sleep, but I still said it was okay for her to come. Once she was there, I didn't really interact with her. I was just trying to get some rest. After she left, she ended up calling my husband. This is when he decided to call her out on the photo op, and how she completely violated a boundary that we'd clearly set. Her response floored me. She began yelling at my husband, saying that I hate her, that I don't like her and I never have, and I'm always so hateful towards her. She said her reasoning for taking the pictures was because she thought we'd want to remember that moment, and to her, it wasn't a big deal, and she didn't see the point in getting upset. Once all of this happened, I decided I needed to distance myself from her and focus on my new family. My husband agreed with doing this as well. Fast forward to about a week and a half ago. My husband and son had been sick for over a week, and I was out doing errands and getting groceries. My mother-in-law asked me multiple times if I wanted anything from the shops. I consistently told her no, but thank you. She was doing the same to my husband, and he would also respond, "No, we're good thanks." I returned home, and my son was screaming. He hadn't slept all day. We decided to try and get some sleep. My husband finally fell asleep, and I finally got my son to fall asleep. About 10 minutes later, there was a knock at my door. My dog went flying, barking her head off and waking my son up. I answered the door. It was my mother-in-law. I just said, "Why are you here?" She responded, "I went to bring you a rotisserie chicken, a trash can, and laundry detergent." I reminded her that we'd already said we didn't want anything, and to not show up at our house unannounced, and that next time she tries to give us some random stuff from the shops, I'll immediately return it to her. We don't want anything from her. She got angry and said she'll never come over or speak to us ever again, and slammed the door. Am I the a-hole? I kinda love how random the stuff she got you was. A trash can? Oh my god, that's so funny. Down in the comments, and So It Goes 24 says, "Not the a-hole. This is wrong of me, but the quickest cure for the always popping by unannounced guest is to stop answering the door like a knee-jerk response to the bell. I never answer the door when I'm not expecting anyone, and I almost never casually grab the phone when it rings either, unless I'm at work. I'll tell anyone later, 'Sorry I missed you, what did you need?' Retrain her just as you would a dog. If she barks, put her on ignore. If she whines, ignore her. If she cries, one long stare before you leave the room. She can perform for the empty seats. Emotional vampires need to get over themselves. I'd have laughed myself at the whole 'I'll never speak to you again' thing, because yeah, thanks a lot. It's all I ever wanted from you anyway. Peace and quiet works." Blotto80 says, "Yep, my wife's parents come over all the time without calling, and I ignore the bell. The dogs will be going off, my car will be in the driveway, and the TV very clearly on and visible from the front steps. Anytime I get the 'We came over for X,' my standard reply is, 'I wasn't expecting anyone, so I didn't bother answering.' Like, this isn't 1972 anymore. Coming over unannounced is rude AF. Am I the a-hole for not allowing my daughter to invite her stepdad to walk her down the aisle, especially since I'm the one paying for everything?" Post by Powerful Activity 333. So, my daughter is getting married next spring. I've been looking forward to this for years, and she and I have always been close. Her mum and I split when she was 12, and she mostly lived with me after that. I've been in her life full time, so I always figured I'd get to have that classic father-daughter moment at her wedding. Her mum remarried about 5 years ago, and let's just say, I'm not a fan of her new husband. He's the type of guy who always needs to be the center of attention, loud and over the top, and just exhausting. He's pulled stunts, even at family gatherings for my side, always making everything about him. I've put up with it to keep things civil, but it's always been a challenge for me. I still invite him though, for my daughter's sake. Fast forward to now, my daughter is wedding planning and told me that she'd like her stepdad to walk her halfway down the aisle with me. I couldn't believe it. I told her that, as her actual father, it's a bit hurtful to have to share this big moment with someone who's only been in her life for a few years. I've been there with her through everything, every school event, every late night, every hard time. Her stepdad has just recently come into the picture, and it stings that she'd want to include him in a moment I always assumed was ours. To make things even harder to swallow, I'm covering all of the wedding expenses. I've spent a significant amount of money so that she could have her dream wedding. I don't want to be petty, but part of me feels like it's only fair to expect that I'd get the honour of walking her down the aisle, just me and her. She got defensive, saying she wants to include him because he's been supportive. But I explained that to me, this is about a father-daughter tradition and how much I value our relationship. Now she's upset, and my ex-wife has also joined in, saying I'm being selfish and making it all about me. I've now become a full-blown topic of discussion, with everyone throwing pretty harsh words my way. In frustration, I finally told her that if she really wants him to be there, she should ask him if he'd also like to split the bill. That might have been a bit much, but I was feeling cornered. So, am I the a-hole for not wanting to share the aisle with her stepdad, especially since I'm paying for the whole thing? I just want to add that my ex-wife and her husband asked her for this. This wasn't something that she came up with. This reminds me of a story from a while back where the mum cheated on the dad, then married the affair partner after he broke the family apart. When the daughter got married, she insisted that her dad and stepdad walk her down the aisle together. She wanted him to walk her down the aisle with the man who his wife cheated on him with and who destroyed his family. That was the hill she wanted to die on. And after the dad paid for everything too. She ended up not budging and walking down the aisle with just her stepdad, blowing up her relationship with her real dad. Then couldn't understand why he went full no contact with her. She was never able to repair that relationship. It was such a sad story. But yeah, just because he's your dad and been there for you through everything doesn't mean you can just take him for granted, stab him in the heart and twist the knife, and still expect everything to be okay. Now, OP's daughter may be disrespecting her dad, but in our next video, OP straight up tries to steal his brother's fiancée because he loves her. If you want to see that, click here, and thanks for watching.